News with Bill, Episode 8. Rhino Head on Street Corner. Hi, and welcome back to News with Bill, where I tell you all about the weird, odd, and bizarre news stories that you won't believe are true, and in a lot of cases, you'll wish they weren't. So, it's been a while since I've been here, and I appreciate you all sticking with me. Some good news, I just read about this, coming up on October 24th. If you're a fan like I am, it brought me great joy to read that Curb Your Enthusiasm is coming back for the 11th season. So, if you're like anything like me, if you're like me, Larry David is your spirit animal. So I'm looking forward to Curb coming back. And let's see, next on my list here to tell you about, so coming off this quarantine, right? I know some places we're still kind of having things going on, but one thing that I discovered during quarantine is there are things like DoorDash and, takeout and all this other stuff. I kind of stopped cooking and I started eating out a lot because, well, I felt sorry for myself when it was a quarantine. So one of the things I'm doing is I'm trying to get back on the wagon. I'm trying to not eat as much or not eat as poorly. And I'm trying to lose a bit of this quarantine that I've accumulated, this spare tire. It's an adventure because there's still the temptation of all that good food, but, then it's like chicken and brown rice. But, I'm trying, so we'll see how that goes. And like I said before, I apologize. It's been a little bit. I'm still trying to get back into a regular production schedule. I think work and my day job, as it were, is going to be calming down a little bit. So I should have more time to spend with this kind of thing, actually what I really enjoy doing. So I was also thinking about, hey, let's look into possible expansion. Let's maybe look into doing some TikTok, some YouTube, and even some Clapper with maybe single story mini takes on video or something. So I don't know. There are just some different ideas I'm working out, stuff to do that will be fun for me, but also increase the content and exposure. And as always, please spread the word. Oh, and I also found a possible source for some interesting snacks. And so if that comes to play, that might do little mini takes on some snacks too. They're going to be kind of not your standard everyday stuff that you find at the grocery store. So I'm excited to see how that turns out, and if it turns out to be something that pans out, actually, to keep the food reference going. Anyway, that's just a couple little updates about what's going on with me. And now, for what you really came here for, let's get to it, shall we? On with the news. All right, so first up, we have United Airlines says no to duct tape. Now, airlines have encountered an unusual number of disorderly customers in recent months, and I'm sure most, if not all of us, have seen the videos online of these crazy people. And as the airlines have continued to have to deal with these people, they've had to come up with some innovative and interesting ways to, contend with these, let's call them personalities. So recently, United Airlines has asked its employees not to use duct tape to restrain unruly passengers. Now, in a memo sent to employees, United flight attendants were urged to, quote, "Please remember that there are designated items on board that may be used in difficult situations, and alternative measures such as tape should never be used." Now, I'm quite frankly curious about what these designated items are. Seemed to me that tape worked pretty darn well. Anyway, the United memo came out soon after you probably saw these online, the American Airlines flight attendants restrained a woman with tape after she tried to open the plane's doors during a flight. Shortly after that incident, duct tape was used on Frontier Airlines when flight attendants restrained a man in his seat after he acted aggressively and allegedly grabbed a flight attendant's breasts. And this isn't entirely new. They have a documented incident from back in 2003 where the airline duct taped a disruptive passenger on a flight from Honolulu to Los Angeles after he began talking and wandering the aisle, pacing and reading the Bible. And then a few years later in 2008, the airline used duct tape again on a passenger after she became violent on a Chicago-bound flight, fighting attendants and grabbing other passengers. The United memo also went on to say that The overwhelming majority of our customers have been on their best behavior and returned to our flights with confidence and enthusiasm. It continued that in instances of disorderly behavior, employees should resort to standard de-escalation measures, including the huddle process, which involves discussing the situation with the captain, customer service representative, and ground security coordinator for evaluation and solutions. Attendants were also directed to use the safety manual to guide decision-making if they feel a customer should be denied service, and were reminded that, quote, in the event they are unable to reach an agreement with a customer about one of their safety-related policies, they should follow their regular de-escalation and training process and always use their best judgment. Well, I tell you what, you know what? These flight attendants have already put up with far too much, in my opinion. And the people who are abusive to staff or other passengers, or who go crazy like that, should get far worse than a little duct tape. Next up, defendant's defecation becomes a focus. So Corey Kendig was charged with killing another man during a confrontation outside of a Pennsylvania strip club. During opening statements at the trial, his attorney said that Kendig was actually a victim, and he actually soiled himself while being assaulted by others. If a person defecating in his pants is not evidence of how scared a person is, I don't know what is, said one of the attorneys who is arguing that the shooting of victim Jeremy Jones was in self-defense. The defecation, including when it occurred, was a focus of much of the testimony that morning at trial. Prosecutors presented testimony from two officers who both said they sat in close proximity of Kendig inside a patrol vehicle after the shooting happened, and both stated that they never made any observations that Kendig had defecated in his pants, nor did they smell anything to indicate that Kendig had defecated himself. One said that he realized hours later that Kendig had defecated himself when he was being transported by ambulance to the hospital to be checked out. Prosecutors also played portions of mobile video recordings taken inside the patrol vehicle where Kendig sat with the officers. During one portion of the recording, Kendig is heard telling the officers that he just fought for his life and that, quote, these guys beat the blank out of me. He followed that with, all I can say is the truth. I got my blank whooped. Officers Williams and Force both testified that Kendig was inside of the Partners strip club, and when they went into the building, Kendig had already put his hands behind his back and stated that he was complying and that it was self-defense. During a search of Kendig, they found a pistol in his jacket. Kendig's lawyers are arguing that Kendig was being assaulted by several people when he fired a gunshot that struck Jones in the abdomen, killing him. The prosecution is arguing that Kendig's injuries were not severe enough for him to respond by shooting the victim. There is no word about any further developments with this trial, and so we have this story about a strip club, a fight, and people being shot, and, of course, everything is focused on defecation. That figures. Couple arrested for mutual pasta battery. Police who responded to a 1 a.m. domestic disturbance found a Florida couple covered in spaghetti, following a physical confrontation that resulted in their arrests on domestic battery charges. According to police, 45-year-old Stephanie Lanas and her boyfriend, 35-year-old Adolfo Rivera, were eating dinner early Friday morning in their Clearwater home when a verbal argument went bad. During the physical confrontation, Lanas and Rivera each shoved a plate of spaghetti in each other's face. It should be of no shock, of course, to you that alcohol was a factor here. And anyway, the mutual combat led to both Lanas and Rivera being arrested for domestic battery. They were booked into the county jail and released the following day on their own recognizance. Both Lanas and Rivera have pleaded not guilty to the misdemeanor count, and a judge has allowed them to have contact with each other while the case proceeds. Now, I'm just wondering, what they possibly could have started to argue about that would have escalated to this. And I guess it's at least a good thing that there weren't any meatballs involved in the battle, huh? All right, this story required some editing. A man cuts off a part and throws it out of the car. So Tyson Gilbert, a 39-year-old Tennessee man, was caught by police after he cut off a body part of his and tossed it out the window during a pursuit. And you'll just have to use your imagination to figure out what part I could possibly be talking about that this man threw out the window. According to local news station WJLE, Gilbert reportedly cut off it and threw it out the window of his Honda Accord as he attempted to escape law enforcement. Now, this all began when he was parked in the middle of a highway blocking traffic. When police pulled up and flagged him down, he sped off. Tennessee Highway Patrolman Bobby Johnson, I mean, that's a pretty Tennessee name too. Bobby Johnson said, "When I pulled up behind him and turned my lights on, he took off and refused to stop. He was all over the road the whole time. He turned off on Old Liberty Bell Road and came to a stop. He opened his door. He was naked and covered in blood. He then shut his door and kept driving." The chase went through 2 counties, and at some point, Gilbert cut off his genitals. Police tried to spike his tires twice during the pursuit. The first strip took out one of Gilbert's front tires, but it wasn't until the second time that it became a slow-speed pursuit with him running on his rims until the police were finally able to box him in. According to the authorities, Gilbert said he cut off his part because he heard voices from his car radio that told him to do it in order to save the world. Now, all I'm saying is he really should have thought about changing stations. Sending biohazardous material through the mail. So I figure let's stay in Tennessee, shall we? So on August 23rd of 2021, 37-year-old Della Marie Gibson pleaded guilty to 2 counts of sending biohazardous materials through the United States mail. She was sentenced to 2 years of probation for her crimes. Now, according to documents filed with the court on or about April 5th, Gibson mailed and had delivered, using the United States Postal Service, a package containing feces to her husband's ex-wife. And then, on or about the 9th, Gibson obtained human blood from a patient during her regular duties as a registered nurse and placed the patient's blood on a feminine napkin, which she then mailed to the same victim, once again using the Postal Service. So while on probation, Gibson will be supervised by the United States Probation Office and must undergo mental health treatment, anger management treatment, and have no contact with the victim or her minor children. In addition, Gibson is prohibited from obtaining or seeking a position in the healthcare field involving direct contact with patients. The postal inspector in charge of the Atlanta divisions said, "The acts done by this defendant in mailing the biohazardous materials could have caused potential harm to the intended recipient, our postal employees, and facilities." The criminal indictment was the result of an investigation by the United States Postal Inspector and the Loudoun County Sheriff's Office. Now, no word about how insane this lady really must have been to do this, but I think we can safely assume that we wouldn't want her as our nurse, and we certainly wouldn't want to get any mail from her. Ohio woman beats another woman with a hammer. An Ohio woman was arrested over the weekend after she pulled a female driver from another car and beat her with a hammer in front of her twin children before stealing her keys. And then the thing is, she bragged about the whole thing on Facebook. So Youngstown police responded to a call regarding a road rage incident involving an unidentified woman who was forced to stop her car when 27-year-old Jamela Chapman allegedly cut her off. According to police reports, Chapman pulled the victim out of her vehicle and started punching and beating her with a hammer while the victim's 5-year-old twins were sitting in the back seat. Before fleeing the scene, Chapman took the victim's keys. When authorities arrived, a woman who was tending to the victim showed them video of Chapman on Facebook Live, threatening the woman and bragging about swiping her keys. The victim sustained cuts to her scalp and arms, but declined medical attention. Police later took Chapman into custody at her home, where they found the hammer, but they were unable to locate the keys. Now, it's still unclear what motivated her to get out of her car and attack the other woman, but I mean, in a case like this with someone this crazy, there may not be a clear motivation. In any case, Chapman has been charged with felonious assault and aggravated burglary. She's being held on a $19,000 bond, and her arraignment has been scheduled to be on Monday. Now, in reading through this, I'm just thinking that the victim was incredibly lucky that she wasn't killed after being beaten with a hammer. And Chapman, well, what can you possibly say about somebody like that? I'm thinking that she obviously has no redeeming qualities as a human being, and she's pretty dumb. And I do want credit that I avoided any MC Hammer reference, and at no point prior to this exact moment did I at any time say, "Stop, hammer time." Now for the namesake of this episode, Rhino head found on street corner. So police in Pennsylvania are investigating after a taxidermied rhinoceros head was found on the sidewalk in Aspinwall. Cameron Taylor was walking his dog when he stumbled upon the head, which I'm hoping he doesn't mean he actually stumbled over the head and onto the ground. But anyway, I digress. So Officer Mike Broker with the Aspinwall Police Department confirmed that one of their officers was flagged down regarding the rhinoceros head. Police took custody of the head, which they say appears to be authentic and is potentially more than 50 years old. Police say they are in the process of contacting the Pennsylvania Department of Conservation and Natural Resources to find out what the legalities of possessing a rhinoceros head actually are. Police say they are also reviewing the surveillance video from nearby homes and businesses to figure out who the man is, where he got the rhino head from, and why he dumped it. And really, think about this. If you knew you weren't going to want it, why would you somehow get a hold of a rhino head in the first place? I mean, it must have been huge and inconvenient to lug around. And just think, wouldn't something smaller be easier, like a prairie dog head or something? Naked woman spews racist insults. An Asian woman is suing her white neighbor over racist harassment caught on video. Plaintiff Thi Bo Tran Pham, who is Vietnamese, says that 72-year-old Jan Myers is a neighbor who is recorded making racist insults in Shoreline, Washington. In one incident, the older woman is naked from the waist down in censored footage. The woman in the video flipped the bird and had allegedly exposed herself not only to Pham, but to Pham's 2-year-old son as well. The complaint that was filed states, quote, "Without provocation, Defendant Myers has on multiple occasions sought Plaintiff Pham out without invitation and actually made racially derogatory and threatening statements to her, including threats against her life. As is clear from the video footage, the Defendant Myers subjected Pham to taunting and threats. In one instance, the woman, identified as Myers, said to Pham from a vehicle, 'Hey, Miss Vietnam, you're not going to live very long.' Additional information from the complaint states, Defendant Myers' home and the plaintiff's homes adjoin each other. Defendant Myers often stares into the plaintiff's home through windows, invading the sanctimony, privacy, and serenity of their home, causing plaintiffs to be very fearful for their own safety. Defendant Myers often stalks and follows Plaintiff Pham when she walks, when she visits parks with her child, and when she sits in her yard, by glaring at Plaintiff Pham and making derogatory, racially motivated remarks." There were some remarks actually mentioned in the article that I'm not going to repeat because they're quite horrible, but just suffice it to say that Myers used horribly racist language to describe Pham and her family. Pham wants at least $100,000 in damages and a permanent protective order requiring Myers to stay 300 feet from Pham and her family. Myers was arrested for a hate crime and released on her own recognizance, and the criminal case is pending. Myers had claimed the neighbor's cat pooped on her lawn and allegedly denied to cops that she threatened Pham or called her Miss Vietnam, but the police called out her lie, citing the video footage. Myers' attorney, who also represents her in the criminal matter, said that he could not comment on the civil lawsuit and that those videos were taken out of context. He acknowledged it was his client in the footage and said the video speaks for itself. So I'm a little confused. How could being a horrible racist who threatens violence on video be taken out of context? As far as I'm concerned, this lady is going to get what she deserves, and probably she deserves a lot more than what she's going to get, to be honest with you. I mean, the world needs fewer people like that, that's for sure. All right, next up we have Chipotle gunslinger. So an unidentified woman waiting in line at a Philadelphia Chipotle pulled a gun and demanded that employees prepare her food after she was told that the restaurant was closing due to staffing issues. The incident, which was caught on surveillance footage just before 5 p.m. on Saturday, took place at Roosevelt Mall in the Ronhurst section of Philadelphia. The footage shows a woman visibly impatient while she waits to order at the cashier. The woman is standing next to a man, and then she places her purse on a railing, reaches into it, and pulls out a dark-colored handgun and gestures to the staff. The cashier told police that just a moment earlier, she was instructed by her manager to close the store, and that customers who were waiting to order were asked to place their orders online as the location was suffering from staffing issues. According to the cashier, the armed woman said, "If someone doesn't make my food, I'll be back and there'll be a problem." And after the staff made the order, the woman told the employees, "Somebody better give me my food." The woman then picked up her food and left. Despite the cashier activating the emergency alarm, the woman was not apprehended, and police are asking for the public's help in identifying the woman. I'd say you can start the search with people who have reported suffering from sudden and severe fecal urgency. Naked driver takes on toll collectors. A motorist is facing multiple felony charges for allegedly exposing himself to a series of toll collectors working on a Florida expressway. On Saturday, 41-year-old Mark Filiaw was arrested and charged in connection with a one-week exposure spree that victimized workers at 3 separate toll plazas. According to the arrest report, Filiaw exposed himself 7 times while passing through the cash lanes of the plazas. The toll collectors reported to police that Filiaw had no clothes on and was showing his privates and touching his you-know-what repeatedly. Filiaw was identified by the individual toll collectors through a photo comparison. He was arrested at his residence in St. Cloud and booked into the county jail on 6 felony exposure of sexual organs counts and 1 misdemeanor exposure charge. The final outcome of this case is not available at the time of this writing, but for some reason I'm thinking that his punishment is going to have, to some way, include the phrase, exact change only. Alrighty, and finally today, pipe bombs for a cause. So a Michigan man has been federally charged with leaving pipe bombs at cell phone stores and threatening letters at cell towers. Supposedly, the man has carried out these acts as part of a moral campaign to end porn and cursing. But also, let's not forget to mention that he wanted a $5 million payday as well. So law enforcement arrested 75-year-old John D. Allen, and later that day, he had his initial appearance in the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Michigan. Allen is charged with extortion and attempted damage or destruction of a building used in interstate commerce. Allen faces the same 2 charges in the Western District of Michigan, though he has not yet had his initial appearance in that jurisdiction. So this whole thing started back in August when a Charter Spectrum employee found a letter inside a polka dot envelope near a telecommunication tower in St. Ignace. The letter contained a threat and extortion demand to AT&T, Verizon, and other carriers. The employee turned the letter over to the Michigan State Police. Additional threatening letters were found in similar polka dot envelopes at cell towers in Gould City and Ontonagon Village. The letters each indicated that they were from the Coalition for Moral Telecommunication, or CMT, and were addressed to AT&T, Verizon, and all other carriers. In the letters, CMT claimed to be almost 30 strong and was prepared to travel throughout this country and begin destroying inner-city tower communications unless several demands were met. One demand said that, quote, all telecommunication containing immoral content must be stopped. And the letter identified immoral content as that which includes cursing, pornography, and all manner of indecent communication. Another demand was payment of $5 million, which had a time limit of 180 days. The letters also stated that if any of CMT's members were arrested, your problems will begin and the price will go up 100 times. The group claimed in the letter that its reach was in 27 states, and on the night of September 15th, a USPS box with black tape and wire coming out was placed outside of an AT&T store in Sault Ste. Marie. Later, that same day, a similar box was placed outside a Verizon store in Sheboygan. Both devices were examined by the FBI Laboratory Explosive Unit, which concluded that they were improvised explosive devices or pipe bombs. Each of the devices consisted of a metal pipe nipple with 2 metal end caps, which provided containment for the explosive powder main charge. Metal ball bearings and nails were found inside of each device. CMT was written on both boxes, which also contained handcuffs. Both boxes also had writing indicating that this was the last warning and that the next incident will be during business hours. Authorities figured out that Allen was a suspect from surveillance camera footage and further investigation. As a result, law enforcement executed a search warrant for Allen's home. After being read his Miranda rights, Allen told the agents he had penned 3 or 4 letters, signed them as the Coalition for Moral Telecommunication, and left them at cell towers in the Upper Peninsula. Allen also admitted to placing the 2 pipe bombs. At his initial appearance, the U.S. District Magistrate Judge ordered Allen held until a detention hearing could take place. Well, with all this, I can just, I kind of just have to think that this sounds like a really great way to win people over to your side of an argument. You know what I mean? Okay, well, that is going to do it for this episode of News with Bill. And I thank you for listening. Please be sure to subscribe to the show and give us your rating wherever you listen to podcasts. And I would really love to hear your feedback or ideas, so please let me know what you think. You can comment on this episode at newswithbill.com/8. And I'm at newswithbill on Twitter and Instagram. And you can send an email to feedback@newswithbill.com. Or call and leave a voicemail at the News with Bill hotline at 209-854-4620. And I'll play your message on the air. Now, please don't forget to tell a friend about the show. Thanks for listening. I'll catch you next time.